Mara had never imagined life would become this hard. She had always been the kind of person who solved her own problems, even if it meant stretching herself thin. But now, with a newborn in her arms and no job to support them, she felt the world closing in on her. The nights were long, the days were exhausting, and the bills kept coming like waves she couldn't outrun. That morning began with her baby's soft cries, hungry cries, the kind that made her heart squeeze with worry. She went to the cupboard hoping she had overlooked a can of formula somewhere, but it was empty. She already knew it was empty, but she checked again anyway. The way desperate people do when hope is the only thing keeping them standing, she pulled on her old jacket, the one missing a button, wrapped her baby carefully and stepped outside. Her first stop was the small grocery store around the corner. The store manager already knew her by face because she visited often, always hoping they had restocked formula. But today, just like the last few days, the shelves were bare. Only a few dusty boxes of cereal sat where the formula should have been. "I'm sorry," the manager said with a helpless shrug. "We haven't gotten any new supply for almost a week." She gave him a tired smile and thanked him anyway. She understood it wasn't his fault, but hearing the same words again was like carrying another stone in her already heavy heart. Her second stop was a larger supermarket across town. She walked there because she couldn't afford a bus ride, pushing the stroller step by step. When she reached the store, she rushed to the baby section, but the aisle was full of frustrated parents. Some were arguing quietly, some were sighing, some were staring at their phones, trying to find another store nearby. The formula shelf again stood nearly empty. Only a single type was left, one she knew her baby couldn't tolerate. She ran her fingers through her hair and stepped back. She didn't want to cry in public. She didn't want to look weak. But the pressure kept building in her chest. She stepped outside for air and leaned on the railing, feeling the cool wind against her face. It helped a little, but the fear was still there. Her third stop was a pharmacy. Not much hope there either. The cashier shook his head before she even finished her question. By the fourth store, her baby was beginning to fuss again, sensing her stress, sensing her body tense. She whispered soft words to calm the little one, but deep inside she was panicking. How could something so basic, something every baby needed, be so difficult to find? And then someone mentioned a high-end grocery store on the other side of the city. She had never been there before. It was the kind of place where expensive cars parked outside, where people shopped without checking price tags. It was far from home, but she didn't care. She would go anywhere. She would do anything for her child. She pushed the stroller for nearly an hour until she reached the store. Her legs ached and her shoulders were stiff from carrying her baby bag, but she tried to keep her posture straight. She didn't want people to look at her with pity. She already felt small enough. Inside the store, everything looked different from the places she usually shopped. The lighting was warm, the aisles spotless, and the shelves full. She took a deep breath, just hoping that maybe she would find formula here, but when she reached the baby section, her stomach dropped again. The shelves were neatly arranged, but the formula section was wiped clean here too. Empty spaces. Not a single can left. She closed her eyes for a moment and stood silently, feeling the weight of defeat settle over her. She wondered how she would feed her baby tonight. Wondered how many more stores she could check before her legs gave out. Just as she was about to leave, she heard two store workers whispering near the front entrance. One of them said something about a private event happening in the store's lounge area. The other mentioned a wealthy businessman visiting, someone famous for his charity and huge donations. People whispered that he was a billionaire, though none of them had ever seen him up close. She didn't care about billionaires or private events, but the mention of him caught her ear for one simple reason. People with power often had access to things that ordinary people couldn't reach. She didn't plan to ask for money. She didn't plan to ask for favors. She didn't plan anything at all. She just knew she couldn't leave without trying one last thing. She walked towards the area where a small group of people in suits stood. They seemed busy, talking in low voices, checking schedules, guiding guests. She stood at a distance, unsure if she should even be there. Her baby shifted in her arms, and she instinctively rocked gently to soothe the little one. Then she saw him. He wasn't surrounded by crowds like she expected. He wasn't giving a speech or posing for photos. He was simply speaking with a store employee, wearing a calm expression, a warm smile, and no trace of arrogance. He didn't look like someone unreachable. She hesitated. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought someone nearby could hear it. Approaching a stranger was hard enough. Approaching a billionaire felt impossible. What if he thought she was begging? What if he ignored her? What if she embarrassed herself? But then her baby let out a soft cry, the kind that reminded her she didn't have the luxury of fear. She took a slow breath and walked toward him. Her steps shaky but determined. One of the security guards stepped forward immediately, raising a hand to stop her. She quickly lifted her free hand and said, "I don't want anything. I'm not here for money. I just have a question." The guard hesitated but didn't push her back. The billionaire, noticing the commotion, turned to look at her. His eyes softened when he saw the baby in her arms. "It's okay," he said gently to the guard. "Let her speak." The guard stepped aside, and suddenly she was standing in front of the most powerful person she had ever seen in her life. She wanted to run. She wanted to disappear. But she forced herself to stay grounded. Her voice shook as she spoke. "I'm sorry to bother you. I've been to so many stores today. I can't find baby formula anywhere. I thought maybe someone like you might know where to get it. That's all I wanted to ask." For a moment, she felt foolish. Here she was talking to a billionaire, not about opportunities, not about money, not about dreams, just baby formula. But that was all she wanted. She wasn't trying to get anything more. To her surprise, he didn't look confused, annoyed, or dismissive. Instead, he looked truly concerned. He asked her a few gentle questions: what brand she needed, how long she had been searching, how old her baby was. She answered softly, afraid she was taking too much of his time. When she finished, he nodded slowly, thoughtful. Then he turned to one of his security staff and said, "Contact the supplier we work with. Ask if they have any cans available today. Anything suitable for infants. Let's see what we can do." She didn't understand everything he said, but the tone alone gave her a feeling she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. He asked her to wait nearby, promising it wouldn't take long. She nodded, still shocked that he was even helping at all. She moved to a quiet corner of the lounge, gently rocking her baby. Feeling both relieved and overwhelmed, she wasn't sure if the plan would work. She wasn't sure if he could actually get formula. But for the first time that day, she wasn't alone in her struggle. In that small shift, someone stepping in, someone listening, felt like a miracle. Mara sat quietly in the corner of the store's lounge, trying to understand what had just happened. She had approached a man she had only seen on news headlines, someone so far above her world that it felt unreal to stand near him. Yet there she was, sitting with her baby resting against her shoulder, waiting because that man had actually listened to her. She looked around nervously. Everything in the lounge felt too fancy: sofas too soft, lights too warm, people too polished. She felt out of place, like she had walked into a world she didn't belong in. But she stayed because it was her last hope. She had been everywhere all morning, and her feet hurt from walking so much. Her baby had stopped crying, but she knew that might not last. She needed to get formula soon. Every few seconds she glanced toward the group of people in suits. They seemed calm, like this was just another normal day for them. One of them spoke into an earpiece, while another typed on a tablet. She wondered if they were really trying to find formula or if they were just pretending to help. People in powerful positions often made promises they never kept. She had learned that the hard way. But when she looked at the billionaire again, she felt a little calmer. He was talking to one of his staff members with a serious expression, not the fake smile that rich people put on for show. He nodded carefully, giving instructions, then checked his watch. He didn't look annoyed. He didn't look rushed. If anything, he looked concerned. It surprised her. People like him didn't usually have time for people like her. After a few minutes, one of his security staff approached her. The man had a kind face, which eased her anxiety a little. He spoke softly. "Ma'am, we're trying to get through to a supplier we work with. They usually have stock." Please give us a little time. She nodded and thanked him. She felt shy talking to him, but grateful that someone was keeping her updated. Her baby shifted again, making a soft sound, and she gently rocked the tiny body in her arms. She whispered, "It's okay. Just a little longer. Mama's trying." As she waited, she thought about how strange life was. One moment, she was walking through crowded aisles, feeling helpless and invisible, and now she was sitting in a warm lounge, waiting for an answer from someone whose decisions affected thousands of people every day. She didn't know what to feel: relief, fear, hope, embarrassment. It was all mixed together in a way that made her chest tight. After about 20 minutes that felt like an hour, the billionaire walked over to her himself. She straightened immediately, her heart racing again. He stopped a respectful distance away and gave her a calm smile. "We contacted the supplier," he said gently. "They confirmed they have some stock in their storage facility. It's not here in the city, but my team is arranging a quick pickup. It might take a little time, but we'll get it for you." Her eyes widened. She didn't know what to say. She had expected maybe a suggestion, maybe a phone number, maybe a "try again tomorrow." She had never expected someone to actually arrange transportation to get formula for her. She swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. "You didn't have to do all that. I just wanted to know if you knew where to find it." "I know," he replied kindly, "and that's why I want to help. No parent should feel this level of stress just to feed their child. It's not right." His words hit her deeply. She had heard pity before. She had heard judgment. But this felt different. This felt like someone actually understood the weight she carried every day. She didn't trust herself to speak without crying. So she just nodded. He gestured toward a small seating area and said, "Please sit comfortably. My team is handling everything. If you need water or anything, let us know." She sat back down, holding her baby close. A warm feeling spread through her chest, not excitement, not joy, but a quiet kind of relief, like someone had lifted a heavy bag off her back for a moment. A few minutes later, he returned again. This time, he sat down across from her. She felt nervous again, but tried to hide it. "I hope you don't mind talking for a few minutes," he said. "While we wait, I'd like to understand more about what's going on. You mentioned you've been to many stores today." She nodded slowly. "Since morning. I walked to 4 stores before coming here. Some were empty, some only had formulas that don't work for my baby. I'm just hoping to find the right one before tonight." He listened with full attention, not interrupting. "And how long has it been like this?" he asked. "For days," she answered. "Every place I check is the same. I tried ordering online, but everything is out of stock or too expensive." He frowned, not at her, but at the situation. "That's unacceptable. A child's basic needs should never be so difficult to meet." She let out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. It felt strange to hear someone like him say something so simple yet so heavy. He continued gently, "Do you mind if I ask how old your baby is?" "Just a few months," she whispered. "Still needs formula every few hours." He nodded. "That must be exhausting for you." She gave a small, tired smile. "I'm used to exhaustion. I just, worry. All the time." There was a brief silence. Not uncomfortable, just thoughtful. He leaned forward slightly. "You don't have to share if you don't want to, but are you getting support from anyone? Family? Friends?" She shook her head softly. "Not really. Most people are struggling in their own ways. I don't want to burden anyone." He nodded again, as if he understood more than she expected. While they were speaking, a staff member approached him and whispered something quietly. The billionaire nodded and turned back to her. "My team has secured the formula," he said gently. "They're picking it up now. It will be here soon." Her eyes stung with emotion. "Thank you. Really. I don't know what else to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied warmly. "You're doing everything you can for your child. That's something to be proud of." She lowered her head for a moment, overwhelmed. She rarely heard words like that. Most days she felt like she was barely holding things together. Hearing someone acknowledge her efforts softened something inside her. "You know," he said after a moment, "your situation isn't unusual. There are many parents facing the same struggle. It shouldn't be this way." She nodded slowly. "I know, I see them everywhere. Everyone is tired and scared." He leaned back slightly, thoughtful. "This shortage, it's a bigger issue than most people realize. And stories like yours, they show what's really happening on the ground. Maybe it's time I paid closer attention to it." She didn't fully understand what he meant, but she could see he was thinking deeply. "Please don't worry," he said gently. "Everything is being arranged. You'll have what you need today." She breathed out shakily, this time not from fear but from grateful relief. But what surprised her most wasn't just the help he was giving. It was the way he talked to her, not like she was a problem to solve, not like she was asking for a handout, but like she was a human being who deserved respect and compassion. Most people didn't treat her that way anymore. As they waited, he continued asking small, gentle questions. Not prying questions, just simple things to understand, not to judge. She found herself talking more than she expected, telling him about walking long distances, about making bottles last longer than they should, about the endless worry of not having enough. He listened closely, sometimes frowning in concern, sometimes nodding thoughtfully, always respectful. She realized something then. It wasn't the formula alone that made her emotional. It was the fact that someone finally saw her struggle, someone who actually had the power to help. She had been invisible for so long, finally, after what felt like both a long time and no time at all. The security staff returned with a sealed package in hand. "Sir," the man said, "we have it." The billionaire stood, thanked the staff, then gestured for Mara to join him. Her heart pounded as she rose from the sofa, holding her baby tighter. She hadn't expected any of this when she walked into the store. She had just hoped to find one can of formula, but what was happening now felt like the start of something much bigger, something she didn't fully understand yet. And as she stepped forward to receive the package that meant the world to her, she had no idea that this moment would not only solve her crisis today, but would lead to a change that would affect the rest of her life. Mara took the package from the security staff with hands that trembled slightly. She couldn't quite believe it. A small part of her wondered if this was some kind of dream, some kindness that she'd wake up from, and she'd still be standing in a store without the formula her baby needed. But the weight of the package in her arms told her it wasn't a dream, it was real. For the first time all day, she felt the tightness in her chest ease. There was a kind of relief she hadn't known she needed until it flooded over her. Her baby, still sleepy, shifted in her arms, and Mara gently rocked him, whispering soft words to soothe him. She'd been on edge for so long, and now, with the formula in her hands, she could breathe. The billionaire, who had been watching from a distance, took a few steps closer. His presence wasn't overwhelming, yet there was something about the way he carried himself that made her feel that even though he was powerful, he didn't need to be intimidating. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked gently, his voice soft, but with an undertone of concern that made her feel seen. Mara looked up at him, still holding the package tightly. I didn't expect this. I thought maybe I'd just leave here empty-handed like I always do. But you actually helped me." He nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "I just did what anyone should do. No one should ever have to go through what you've been going through. Especially not for something as simple as formula." Her heart swelled with gratitude, but also something else, a kind of quiet sadness. Because in truth, his words weren't just a reflection of kindness. They were a reminder of how much people like her had been overlooked, of how many others were likely experiencing the same struggle, just trying to get the basics for their children and feeling invisible in the process. "I can't thank you enough," she said softly, her voice catching a little. "You don't need to," he said with a calm smile. "It's my privilege to help." The words felt genuine. He wasn't saying them out of obligation or some forced sense of charity. It was clear to Mara that he believed what he was saying. For the first time, she felt a little less alone in the world. She had expected to walk out of the store that day feeling defeated, as she always did when she couldn't find what her baby needed. But instead, she had something in her hands that would make a huge difference, not just today, but for the next few days. And she had a glimpse of something else, the idea that someone out there saw her struggle, acknowledged it, and was doing something about it. As they stood there in silence for a moment, a staff member from the store approached again. He was holding a small card which he handed to Mara. "This is from Mr. Ward," the man said, nodding toward the billionaire. "It's a voucher for additional supplies. It should cover the cost of the formula for the next few months. Please don't hesitate to contact us if you need anything else." Mara took the card, her fingers a little stiff as she read the words. She felt a lump rise in her throat. She hadn't expected anything like this. She had only asked for formula, only asked for help in the smallest way. But here she was, holding a voucher that could change so much for her and her baby. The billionaire, seeing her reaction, spoke again. "I know it's hard to ask for help. It's hard to admit when you're struggling, but I'm glad you reached out. And I hope this makes things a little easier for you." Mara swallowed, trying to collect herself. She wasn't used to receiving help like this, not without feeling like she had to give something in return. "I don't know how to say this, but thank you. I don't know how I would have made it through today without you." "It's nothing," he said, his smile kind and reassuring. "I'm just glad you came to us. You matter. Your child matters." Those words stuck with her long after she left the store. You matter. Your child matters. It felt like the first time in a long time that anyone had said something that made her feel like more than just a single mother in a difficult situation. It made her feel like she wasn't invisible. It made her feel like she had value, like the effort she was putting into caring for her baby was recognized, even if the world around her often seemed too busy to notice. As she walked out of the store, her baby tucked close to her chest, Mara glanced down at the voucher in her hand. It was a small piece of paper, but it symbolized so much more than just a few cans of formula. It symbolized hope. It symbolized that people who had the power to make a difference weren't always inaccessible or out of reach. Sometimes they were the ones who saw a need and took action. Sometimes they were the ones who cared. But as she walked through the parking lot toward the bus stop, a thought nagged at the back of her mind. The formula she had just gotten was a temporary solution. It would last for a while, yes. But what about after that? What if the shortage continued? What if she couldn't get help again? Her worries weren't gone. They couldn't be. The realities of life still loomed over her. Bills, rent, the uncertainty of tomorrow. But today something had shifted. She had seen that there were people out there who cared, even when it seemed like no one did. She had felt it in her bones. And for the first time in months, it wasn't just a fleeting thought. It was a truth she could hold on to. When she got home, she unpacked the formula and placed the voucher on the kitchen counter. She smiled at her baby, who was now awake, looking up at her with those trusting eyes. She felt like she had given him something more today than just food. She had given him a glimpse of a world where people could be kind, where help could come when you least expected it. And maybe, just maybe, that was the foundation of something bigger for both of them. The next morning, when she walked to the store to buy some groceries, something felt different. The weight of the world was still heavy on her shoulders, but she wasn't carrying it alone anymore. The kindness she had received, the sense that someone had cared enough to help, stayed with her. It wasn't the end of her struggles, but it was the beginning of something new. And as she moved through the aisles, the thought crossed her mind, what if the billionaire's actions weren't just a one-time gesture? What if there were more people out there, more organizations, more programs ready to offer support? What if the help she received could spark change for others in her position? She didn't know yet, but she was determined to find out. It wasn't just about the formula. It wasn't just about getting by today. It was about something deeper, about the kind of world she wanted for her baby and the kind of world she wanted for herself. She wanted a world where no mother had to ask for the basics, where no parent felt invisible. And maybe, just maybe, she could be a part of making that happen. The next few days after Mara's visit to the store felt like a strange mixture of relief and cautious optimism. The formula she had received was enough to last her for a while, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't have to worry about her baby going hungry. But even with the immediate problem solved, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to her situation than just finding a temporary fix. There was still so much to figure out. Mara found herself thinking a lot about the billionaire's words. You matter. Your child matters. Those simple phrases seemed to echo in her mind every time she faced a new challenge. It was like they had planted a seed in her heart, a reminder that she didn't have to do everything alone. For so long, she had been pushing forward, surviving one day at a time, always focused on just getting through the next challenge. But now, after the help she had received, something inside her felt different. Maybe it wasn't about surviving anymore. Maybe it was about living with hope, and having the confidence that help could come when she needed it most. Her baby was doing better too. With the formula and the added peace of mind, she found it easier to focus on the small joys of motherhood. She spent more time smiling at her baby, feeling the warmth of his little hands wrapped around her finger. These moments were precious moments that had once been clouded by worry, but now felt like treasures she could hold on to. But the weight of her situation still lingered. Even with the formula and the promise of a little help, Mara knew that the bigger problems hadn't gone away. The bills were still piling up. Her rent was due, and she wasn't sure how she would pay it. Her job search hadn't been going well either. Every interview seemed to end the same way: thanks, but no thanks. She was a good worker, she knew that. But without a stable income and reliable childcare, how could she prove it? Mara often found herself sitting in front of her computer, scrolling through job listings that seemed to promise more than they could offer. Every opportunity seemed out of reach. The more she looked, the more discouraged she became. There was always something missing, something she lacked. Whether it was experience, qualifications, or even just the right timing, it always felt like she was one step behind. That's when she remembered the card from the store. The voucher she had received was still sitting on the kitchen counter, a reminder that there was someone who had cared enough to help. It wasn't just about the formula. It was about the fact that someone had seen her, heard her, and decided to make a difference. Maybe, just maybe, this was the start of something bigger. A few days later, Mara found herself sitting at her kitchen table, staring at the card again. She hadn't yet used it. Didn't feel like she had the right to take more help. But something inside her told her to pick up the phone. Maybe this was the chance to find out if there were any other resources available. Maybe it was time to stop thinking she had to do everything on her own. She called the number on the card, and was surprised when someone answered right away. The voice on the other end was calm and professional, yet warm. After explaining who she was, she mentioned the voucher she had received and asked if there were any other programs or assistance she might be eligible for. The person on the other end listened carefully, then explained that they not only provided assistance for families in immediate need, but also offered job training programs, childcare support, and even emergency financial help for those who were struggling to get back on their feet. Mara could hardly believe what she was hearing. This was more than just a handout. This was real support and opportunity to break the cycle she had been stuck in for so long. She had spent so many years trying to figure everything out on her own, but now there was a chance to get help, to learn, to grow, and to give her child a better life. The voice on the phone explained how the program worked. We provide a variety of services designed to help parents like you, they said. Our job training programs are tailored to your skills and experience, and we offer childcare services so you can attend without worrying about your baby. We also have emergency funds available for things like rent or utilities if you find yourself in a tight spot. Mara's heart began to race. She had always known she needed help, but she never imagined it could be so comprehensive. This wasn't just about surviving. This was about building a future. This was the kind of support she had only dreamed of. She thanked the person on the phone, feeling a rush of gratitude. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to imagine what life could be like if things changed. What if she could finally get back to work? What if she could provide her child with more than just the bare minimum? The following week, Mara enrolled in the job training program. It wasn't easy at first. She had been out of work for so long, and the thought of re-entering the workforce felt overwhelming. But the program was designed to ease the transition, offering classes that taught both hard skills and soft skills, things like resume writing, interview preparation, and time management. Every day, Mara learned something new, and each day, she felt a little more confident. At the same time, the childcare services allowed her to focus on her studies without worrying about her baby. For the first time, Mara didn't feel torn between her responsibilities. She could be present for both her child and her future, something she had never been able to do before. As the weeks went by, Mara started to feel a shift in herself. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was building a new life, one where her child's future didn't have to be shaped by her current struggles. Every class she attended, every lesson she learned, felt like a step toward something bigger, something better. And with the childcare support, she didn't have to choose between her future and her baby's needs. She could do both, but even as she began to see her own potential, there was still a nagging feeling in the back of her mind. What about the other parents? What about the ones who didn't have the same opportunities, the ones who didn't know where to turn? What about the parents who were still struggling, who didn't have access to the support she had found? That's when she realized something. Maybe she didn't have to keep this to herself. Maybe she could help others just like she had been helped. She started talking to other parents in her neighborhood, sharing her story, telling them about the resources she had found. Slowly, word spread, and more people started reaching out for help. Mara didn't have all the answers, but she could offer a hand. She could offer hope. And maybe, just maybe, she could help create a ripple effect that would spread through her community. Because if there was one thing she had learned over the past few months, it was that change didn't have to be a solo journey. It could be a collective effort. One evening, after a long day of classes and work, Mara sat down on her couch, feeling both exhausted and proud. Her baby was asleep beside her, and as she watched him breathe softly in his sleep, she thought about how far they had come. Not everything was perfect. Not everything was easy. But for the first time in a long time, Mara felt like she had a chance at something better. She wasn't just waiting for life to happen anymore. She was making it happen. And that made all the difference. She pulled out the small notebook she had started keeping in her bag. On the first page she had written, "Your child matters. You matter." It wasn't just a reminder of the day she had received help. It was a reminder of who she was becoming, the person who no longer just survived, but thrived. The person who had hope. The person who had a future. And that future, for the first time in a long time, seemed within her reach. As Mara continued to work through the job training program, her days began to blend into a steady rhythm of learning, caring for her baby, and planning for the future. It wasn't easy. Some days, the exhaustion hit her harder than others. There were moments when the weight of everything seemed too much to bear. But despite the challenges, something inside her had shifted. She wasn't just going through the motions anymore. She was building something, a new life, not just for herself, but for her child, her baby. Now, growing quickly, was a constant reminder of why she had to keep going. His wide, curious eyes seemed to take in everything around him, and Mara could feel the pressure of wanting to give him the world. She had dreams for him, dreams that went far beyond just surviving day to day. She wanted him to have opportunities, to see that life could be full of possibilities, no matter where you started from. Some nights, after a long day, Mara would sit with her baby in her arms, staring out the window, thinking about what the future might look like. She was no longer consumed by fear or anxiety about not having enough. There was a quiet confidence growing within her. She had started believing that no matter how difficult things got, she could find a way through it. It wasn't just the job training program that was changing her life. It was the community she had found, other parents, mentors, and people who cared. When Mara first walked into the program, she was nervous, unsure if she belonged. But now, she had friends, people who understood her struggles and offered support. It felt like a small family, one where no one was judged. And everyone was there for the same purpose, to do better for their children. One afternoon, As Mara sat with a group of other parents during one of the program's workshops, she heard a familiar voice. It was the same voice from the store the billionaire who had helped her. He had visited the program to check in on how things were going, to see how the resources were being used, and whether people were getting the support they needed. At first, Mara wasn't sure what to do. She hadn't expected to see him again. The last time they spoke, he had been so kind, but now, sitting among other parents, she felt like an ordinary person in an extraordinary place. She didn't want to seem out of place or draw attention to herself. But then she remembered his words, "You matter. Your child matters." Taking a deep breath, she stood up, feeling the familiar rush of nervousness. But when she saw him, something inside her steadied. He was the same man who had taken the time to listen to her, who had helped when she felt lost. She walked over, a little unsure of what to say, but confident in her own right to speak. He turned when he heard her approach, his expression softening when he recognized her. "I didn't expect to see you here," he said with a smile. Mara smiled back, feeling the warmth of the moment. "I didn't expect to be here," she admitted. "But things are going better now, thanks to the help I got." His face lit up with genuine happiness. "I'm so glad to hear that. You should be proud of how far you've come." She nodded, feeling a little embarrassed but also proud. She had come a long way since the day she had walked into that store, unsure of what to do. Now she was working hard to build a future. He asked about her progress in the program, and she shared how the job training had been both challenging and rewarding. It felt good to talk about it, to share her experiences with someone who had made a difference. He seemed genuinely interested in how she was doing, and she appreciated that. "You're doing important work," he said, his voice sincere. "And I'm proud of you. You're not just surviving anymore, you're thriving." Mara couldn't help but smile. It felt good to hear those words, especially from someone who had seen her at her lowest. She wasn't just struggling anymore. She was building a future full of possibilities for her child. As they spoke, Mara realized that this moment wasn't just about the help she had received. It was about the impact that one act of kindness could have on a person's life. One simple gesture, a few words of encouragement, a small act of generosity had given her the strength to keep going. And now she was passing that strength on to others. Over the following weeks, Mara began to feel like she had found a new purpose. She wasn't just focusing on her own growth. She was thinking about how she could help others too. She had experienced firsthand how difficult it was to find the help you needed when you were struggling. Now, she wanted to be the person who could offer a hand to someone else in need. She began to talk more with other parents in the program, sharing her story and encouraging them when they felt discouraged. There were many people in the program who were just starting out, who felt overwhelmed by the challenges of balancing work, family, and their own personal growth. Mara knew exactly how they felt, and she wanted to be the person who showed them it was possible to overcome those obstacles. One afternoon, after a particularly tough class, Mara found herself talking to a mother who had just arrived at the program. The woman looked exhausted, overwhelmed by the thought of juggling everything. Mara could see the same fear in her eyes that she had felt not so long ago, the fear that things might never get better, that the struggle would never end. "I don't know if I can do this," the woman said, her voice shaky. "I don't know how I'm going to make it through." Mara placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "I know it feels like that right now," she said softly. "I felt the same way when I first started. But you're not alone. There's a whole community here to support you, and you're stronger than you think." The woman looked at her with a mix of doubt and hope. "But what if I fail?" Mara smiled gently. "You won't fail. Not if you keep going. One step at a time. That's all we can do. Just take it one step at a time." The woman nodded slowly, as if the words had started to sink in. Mara could see the change in her, a small glimmer of hope where there had been none before. It reminded Mara of where she had been, of the time when she had doubted everything, but kept going anyway. That conversation marked a turning point for Mara. She realized that while her journey had been hard, it had also made her strong. And now she had the chance to help others become strong. As the months went by, Mara continued to thrive in the program. She completed her job training and began to apply for positions that would offer a better future for her and her baby. The interviews were still nerve-wracking, but Mara no longer felt like she was just waiting for a chance. She was creating opportunities for herself. One day, she received an email with an offer for a full-time job at a company she had applied to months earlier. Her heart raced as she read through the details, the salary, the benefits, the hours. It was everything she had hoped for and more. It wasn't just a job. It was a chance to build a future, to create stability for her child. She sat there for a moment, letting it sink in. For so long, she had doubted her ability to succeed, to find a way out of the struggle. But now, she was finally seeing the fruits of her hard work. The future wasn't uncertain anymore. It was within her reach. When she called the company to accept the offer, she felt a rush of emotions. She was proud of herself, proud of how far she had come. But she also thought about everyone who had helped her along the way, the people at the program, the billionaire who had listened when she needed it most, and the other parents who had supported her. For the first time in a long time, Mara felt like she was on the right path. It wasn't a perfect path, and there would still be challenges ahead. But she knew she could handle whatever came next. She had built a strong foundation, and now it was time to build on it. As she looked down at her baby, now nearly a toddler, she smiled. She was no longer just surviving. She was living, and she was ready for whatever the future had in store.